And I believe we are now recording. I do this every night. Conversations with Calvin, We the Species, and I always have these special things to say, and this is a special evening with Asha von Liebtag, and the best part of this is we met on LinkedIn a while back ago, and I kind of looked at your resume, your history, and I'm trying to process you and your accomplishments. Hey, I call it as I see it, and it was so overwhelming for me to see what you've accomplished in education. By the way, everybody, the video title of this, Asha von Liebtag, Ed.M, MA, founder of Liberate LLC, educational consultant, motivational speaker, teacher, mentor, and all the contact information will appear on the bottom. There's so much to unpack and learn about you in the field of education. We were chatting for a long time before we went on air.
Oh yeah.
You and I, I had a couple of confessions to you. One of them is I got a couple of degrees from Rutgers, but I can't. I know what you do, but I can't. So enough with my intros. You are amazing in the field of education. So why don't you take it away and do a little bio and intro, and we'll jump into the chat.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me here tonight and for us continuing our conversation, Calvin. I really enjoy you and I enjoy what you do. And I love how we're both repping Rutgers.
Yeah. I got my thing behind.
I see. So, that whole question of, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're supposed to condense yourself down into a nugget. It's always the hardest to tackle, right? If I had to start, I would start with where we both started and connected with. I hail, just like you, Calvin, from Newark, New Jersey, which I thought was important to note. If I really had to define myself, it would be two different ways. One, I believe at my very core, I'm a teacher, right? I'm an educator. That's just what I love to do. It's my passion. It's my drive. The two things that I would narrow it down to one is my strength is empathy. I'm empathetic. And I think that is fundamentally Asha, right? Just to kind of give you a little bit about me, Calvin, went to Rutgers University, majored in English, went on further to my master's, got it in English education, started off at Ridge High School, went and taught back to Newark in my hometown at North Star, and just wrapped up my career after teaching at Summit High School for about 8+ years. Ultimately, Calvin, this journey within education, I even went further to get a second master's in educational leadership because I wanted to see other ways, other directions in which I can impact students, right? How else can I have a bigger impact outside of the classroom? But I started to realize that you don't have to go the traditional route, right? You don't have to stay linear, right? That's when I started Lit to Liberate, okay? And that's where I essentially thought to myself, what can I do with this passion? How else can I impact students? So right now, I'm an academic coach for a private educational organization. I do academic coaching with first and second year college students and helping them transition to college and effectively, hopefully from high school, as well as do academic coaching with high schoolers. I work with Rutgers Graduate School of Education as a teacher portfolio coach.
I was going to ask you about that. Can you define that? What is that?
Of course. Okay. Yes. For those outside the education realm. So essentially what teachers have to do is they have to send their portfolio, all the lesson planning, all the things that they do in their classroom. They get their best stuff and they have to break down their lesson plans in such a way, very detailed. Sometimes one task can be about 20 pages long, right? breaking down those lesson plans, showing the planning, showing the assessments, showing the student understanding, the growth. I mean, all of those things, and send it to the state. And the state decides whether or not you can be approved, it passes, and you get your certification to teach in the state of New Jersey. I, as a coach, provide them feedback, direct feedback to the entire portfolio. And I do this with specifically the English teachers, and to help them pass. So that's the thing I do. It's fun. So yes, that's one of the things I do for Rutgers. And of course, I'm also in the process of writing a book.
Yes, I wanted you to talk about the book, a little bit about it, the purpose of the book.
Yeah, of course. Still in the process of it. I think the best way to define this journey, this book, as it's wrapping up is I try to think of a way, like I said, of how I can approach what I do in a classroom as a high school English teacher, right? Those literary skills of analyzing, synthesizing, right? All those things that we apply to the book to thoroughly understand it, to critique it, right? I wanted to show how those very same skills can be applied to life, right? To make you a better critical thinker about your world, to help you analyze the things that you see around you, as well as to hopefully develop you, right, the students, into better people, right? Because the more that we see, the more that we understand, the more those skills we apply, I truly believe the better we become as individuals, and the better we are in interacting with the world around us.
So interesting. So still we're on the topic of the book. So from your book, can you give me an example of like one of these literary skills you would teach in a classroom, and explain how it could be used as a life skill or a lesson, if that makes sense?
That makes sense, Calvin. I'm going to go to chapter 1. One of the skills that I love teaching in the classroom is latent text. Do you know what that is, Calvin?
Absolutely not. No clue. And I'm married to a teacher. 43 years.
Oh yeah.
Out there. But I have no clue.
So essentially what I do with my students, right, is we sit down and we read. And what latent text tells you to do is you have to look for what the author does not say. Because what's not present is just as present as what is present.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And it speaks just as loudly as the words that are printed there. Authors strategically leave certain things out, right? Now, of course, if you look up the definition of latent, right, it's important to know that it's present, but it's not active, right? Something needs to happen to bring it out, to make it clear. It's not overt, it's not obvious, it's something subtle, right? Therefore, you have to read in between the lines. It's a very important close reading skill. In chapter 1, one of the ways in which I saw that happen, or that lesson, it hit me in my life. Of course, I realized it years later, not at the time, but I talk about the time where I was a 3rd grader, and it's a very traumatic experience, right? But when you're living in a time where your parents are in a situation where they've hit rock bottom, right? They've fallen into depression, they've fallen into drugs. Kids are in that setting as well, right? At this point, because of our living conditions have gotten so bad, I literally talk about the experience the first time where I have gotten so out of control that I had to literally sit and piss in a pot. Wow. And while I'm going through this traumatic experience, trying to process this as a 3rd grader, what the heck is happening? Why do I feel so ashamed and embarrassed? I remember and go back and flash back and talk about how a week earlier, where I was called out in the gymnasium by a lunch aide, During the entire, of course, that's during the time the entire school is in the gym and they're playing. And of course, she calls and tells everybody to line up against the wall after she announces that someone stinks. And of course, as you know, what young kids do, they go around, who is not me, and smelling underneath each other's arms and joking around and saying, it's you, you stink, and finding reason to bully and pick. And then, of course, after we're all lined up against the wall, she calls students one by one to walk all the way across the gym, stand in front of her, and then run her sniff test. And of course, I was called out. And I lifted my arms. And of course, at that very moment, when she realized it was me, she berated me right where I stood and pretty much used words blaming me as if I'm the cause of this, like, how could you possibly let this happen to yourself? That was a very traumatic experience for me, right? One of the things I realized, of course, as I grew up, other than the fact that it was a horrendous experience and she did an awful job in showing empathy, which is why empathy is at my core, right? Is that she clearly never learned to look for the latent, right? I guarantee you that when she saw me, she saw a single story, right? Which we learn about. We watched a TED talk on that. She just thought that I was a poor Black girl, urban area, who probably just didn't care, whose parents didn't care, and she had to teach me to care. You know, she didn't dig underneath. She didn't question. She didn't ask. She didn't try to look for the subtle signs. She didn't think about my mom being, you know, working at the VA hospital, being college educated, but literally succumbed to depression and drug abuse. She didn't know about my father, who was a police officer who worked in East Orange, who was also highly intelligent, but succumbed to this depression and drug abuse. And therefore, because she didn't see me, because she didn't have the skill of trying to assess and interact and pull out the latent, she just labeled me and took me as being the stereotype, took me on the surface level of what was obviously there, and she interacted me as such. And I think that that's one of the things I try to get across in chapter 1, the power of applying literary skill, but not to the text, but to your world, so that you can have more of a critical trained eye in what you see and hopefully interact with it accordingly.
All right, that incident really impacted you.
Oh, yes.
I
Absolutely.
mean, really impacted you. And it's almost, I always like to, you know, I always like to do the lemon lemonade thing in a way that really helped set you on a path and made you so conscious.
Oh, yeah.
So in some strange, obscene kind of way, that horrific experience was a positive thing because it helped mold you.
Yeah, among many other things.
But I mean, completely wrong. It's funny. I look back at Maple Avenue School in Newark, where I went, and a few things happened to me there that I still remember, not necessarily positive.
Yes.
That I still remember that it was impactful. So that's so interesting to hear you say this kind of. So while we're on the subject of the book, because it fascinates me, how is the book going to be aligned with your business, Lit to Liberate? And by the way, also, what does the title actually mean? Lit to Liberate. This.
So I love the question. So the way I see it, lit is an abbreviation of literacy.
I figured that.
And I absolutely believe that literacy liberates. My grandmother, right, who was literally, her mother gave birth and then left her in the cotton fields. She was found, taken in, and raised And eventually years come down and my grandmother started to raise me. One thing that she taught me, this woman who came from being rejected to being in a situation where she learned to love herself, went straight through, got her master's, worked at a really good job, had her own home, had her own car, against all odds. She was my shero. And she was the one that showed me how literacy, and I'm not just talking about just reading books, I'm talking about the way in which you communicate with others, the way that you perceive your world, everything, text, visual, symbols, it's all text, it's all literacy. If you're able to know how to interact with it, if you take it in, if you receive it, if you process it, you absolutely can have, right? Figure out a way to better your life, to better yourself. And I truly believe that. My grandmother absolutely told me to strive for excellence. So with Lit to Liberate and with the book, that's something that I intend to do. In every capacity, the very fundamental core comes back to literacy, right? And I plan to use that in a sense to motivate, to inspire, to teach, educate about a variety of different things. But I use it as a platform to just talk about any and everything that needs to be addressed, including taboos. Our kids love taboos.
So that's part of your vision of what you've just described, a vision of Lit to Liberate.
Absolutely. My vision is stepping outside the classroom, tearing down all those confining walls, tearing that down the motor brick school, and showing the students, showing people that the classroom should not confine your learning, that what you learn, you should take out with you into the world. And that is that you're a student of life. And these same skills and things that you learn in your English class, that is the platform to what you should do to help you understand and see your life. That's my vision. And instead of doing that one class at a time, because I love my babies, I love what I was in class and what I did in the classroom, but now I can do that with so many more people. And I think that that's absolutely the vision, to reach as far and as many as I can.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, this company, this journey of yours, Lit to Liberate, what other services will it provide?
Okay, so if I had to do this, I would break it down to three different categories, right?
Okay.
If I think about teachers would be one category. So I work with teachers. In the past, I've done quite a few teacher conventions, whether in NJEA or whether in CTE. I'm going to try to fly to different universities that I've spoken at. I pretty much work with teachers and trying to train them, especially with English teachers or new teachers, in different ways that you can approach the classroom, captivate, engage the students, how you can really create materials that will push past summary, that will push students to become critical thinkers and learn how to think for themselves, right? Something that James Baldwin said, that teachers should be their goal and what they should inspire to do. The second thing or group is that I go into schools to try to do motivational speaking. That is something that I absolutely want to pick up and continue to do, especially once COVID starts to get under control. And then, of course, the big category as well is what I do with the schools, coming in, working with classrooms, academic coaching, which I currently do now, mentioned earlier, as well as English tutoring. Can't get away from English as well. So in a nutshell, those are some of the services that I pretty much provide with Lit to Liberate.
Okay. And again, people can find right here on the bottom the website for Lit to Liberate. Just a little off topic.
Sure.
I forewarned you.
Okay, good. I'm more.
I forewarned you. I always love to ask a couple of Calvin questions. So question one, off topic, is excluding family or friends. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Oh my gosh.
You can throw a couple out there. You don't have to confine yourself.
Yeah, good. It would be two of my favorite. Well, actually, come on, let's go with three. Malcolm Gladwell, I want to hunt down and have a special day with. I love his work. I love his brain. I could sit down and just like, even the way like you can like watch him and it's like you can see the information processing. He is so bright, and the way that he looks at his world, the way that he finds patterns to dissect. Love it. Toni Morrison. I had an opportunity to go and see her
Wow.
a few years ago, and something came up and I could not, and I beat myself up for it every time. One of the life-changing books for me was Beloved. And you know, the mother was my mother and I was beloved, which is a crazy dynamic. If you know the story, it's like, wait, what? But that book helped transform me and even my relationship with my mom. Love her and her mind. And then of course, George Orwell, 1984, boom. I don't even think I could teach that book. I would need a year to just dissect each chapter. It's so fascinating. I love his work. But those three,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And then of course I have to Michelle Obama. I have to, okay.
You know, I met her brother.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. Her brother was a Big Ten. He used to play basketball for Princeton, and he got a job for the Big Ten network.
Yeah.
He was doing game basketball. He was doing basketball commentary. So a few times I met him. I used to hang around after the games. I was the last one to leave the rack. I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I loved it. And a couple times he came down and we kind of chatted. And
cool.
At that time I had a cable TV talk show for NJ Discover, and I invited him to come on. He was actually living, he's gone now. He moved wherever he moved. He's gone on to other things. But I had invited him to come on, you know, my TV show. I'm not shy. So the next little Calvin question, this may work, it may not work. Can you recall from your memory banks the best piece of advice you ever got? And you can pass on this. These are.
You know what? I'm going to go personal with this one.
Sure.
Always kiss your spouse goodnight.
Great.
I would never forget running across this couple. Oh my goodness. They were so cute. They were coming out of CBS and he was holding her hand. They were definitely an older couple, and he went and got her door and she sat inside, and while he was going around, and you could tell it was with such warmth. And I asked him, I said, "What's the secret? What's the secret?" And he looked at me and he said, "You know what? You might go to bed angry, but always kiss each other goodnight. Don't try to get rid of that anger before the end of the night." And he told me that they were married for like 75 years or 70 years or something ridiculous like that. And I was just blown away. So I try to live with that with my husband.
That's great.
I try to live by that. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along. In part of your resume, there's so many things you do educationally. What fueled your desire to become an adolescent and young adult motivational speaker?
Anybody who has ever sat in my classroom and just watched me, it's like I become, you know, I feel like I tell the students all the time, people don't sit down and with these blank pages and write with the purpose of someone to look at the words and say, what do you think his tone is? Well, I think that the theme, overall theme, like they're pouring their soul on the paper. They're pouring out the story on the paper. They want you to walk away being moved or something by it, right? Like, what lesson can you learn from all these things that I said, and not some theme where you walk away with the cute little logo that's attached to the book. I mean, you walk away feeling impacted, right, by consuming them. I always felt like what I do as an educator is much more than just disseminate that knowledge to like program to the kids' heads. It's so much more than that. Your mentor, your supporter, you're the confidant. Sometimes you feel like their parent. Sometimes you feel like their babysitter, right? Like you're the guidance counselor. So much more. But one thing I think we absolutely are motivators, and right, like you have to find a way of reaching all of them and getting them to believe what they're doing is worthwhile, that it's more than just a letter, that it's more than just because I said so, that this institutional structure designed it for you to be tortured throughout your high school experience, right? Like it's more than that. Let me inspire you. Let me motivate you to see how this connects to life, how this can impact you and those around you and how you view your world. Like that means something to me. So to take that outside the classroom, right, and just spread that motivation to different like auditoriums and different schools and use, of course, teaching aspects of literary skills with that. What? I feel like that's what an English teacher did. Well, maybe it's just me and the nerd in me, but I feel like that should be everybody's inspirational goal, right? I love it. I love it.
Wow. Yeah, someday I'd love to sit in on a class. We'll file that just to kind of observe and get that energy, because you have enormous, you could feel it, you can sense it, the energy, the caring. Someday. Good segue. If you had to name one or some of the best qualities that a teacher can have, what would it be?
Oh, hands down, every day, all day, empathy.
Which you said already.
Yeah. I can't begin to tell you how throughout the years certain things that you see, teachers who should have left a long time ago, new teachers who come in who thought the job would be so much easier. If you look at the statistics of how many people drop out of being an educator within the first year, within the first 3 years, within the first 5 years, it's astronomical, right? And it makes sense, because I don't think that they really understand what it is that they do, right? If you think that they're just going to listen and obey like trolls, like as if like with Led Zeppelin, but like there's some brick and wall, right? Teacher, leave those kids alone, right? Like yeah, you're gonna run into something, but you gotta see them. You gotta see them to reach them, right? And if you don't see them, you might make a terrible mistake, like that lunch aide made with me, right? You might turn something off. You might say something that might make a kid say, I'm too dumb for this, so why pursue it? And then literally the world lose a potentially amazing person. Right? Like reading Michelle Obama's thing when she talked about it, I was like, wow, but what if that guidance counselor made her believe what she said? We could have lost her, right? It's powerful. We have to empathize. And the moment you don't practice that, you don't empathize and you sympathize, which are two different things, right? The denotations are different. It's just devastating. It could be devastating. You have to see them for who they are, not pity them, but see them so you can find the best way to help them. You'll understand how they see their world, so you know how you can change and adapt to help them see what you want them to see. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
The way they do.
What you're talking about is enormous responsibility.
It is. It is. And you don't
Enormous.
get paid enough.
No, well,
That's a big undertaking.
yeah, enormous. The
Match
motivate
paycheck.
and in capturing,
Yeah.
you know, to capture a student, and
Yeah.
it's so gratifying when it works. But
Oh man,
but
it's
there's
what
no
you-
let up, is there? There's never a moment of let up.
No.
It is so
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I left the classroom. I mean, fortunately, the state of COVID, but with Live to Liberate, I just felt like I can do more. I can reach more than just 100+ students at a time during a year. I want to do more quicker. I want more volume. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes.
Okay. I guess we can kind of wind down a bit. Before I ask the kind of like the last question, I do want to say on air that as your book comes to fruition and Lit to Liberate, please come back.
Of course, Calvin.
One of the great qualities of life to me is loyalty.
Yes.
So we're friends, and this little forum continues to grow. So you can come back. Please do come back. And
I think this year I'm gonna complicate that a little bit. I think it surpasses loyalty. I think COVID, if it's taught us one lesson, is connection is huge. So I will flip that back on you, and I would love to say, like, we just have to connect more. And I appreciate this coming out of connection, and not in a sense of us treating each other as a commodity, right? But connecting on the most human level, right? Of seeing each other as humans and saying, you know what, as a human, you're interesting. I would like to connect with you and learn something from you. I would love to connect with you because it's a beautiful feeling, right?
It is.
It changes me. It shapes my
is.
perspective of the world. And I think that's powerful. Connection is so powerful. So thank you for connecting with me.
No,
in a
listen,
meaningful way.
thank you. And that's part of my title, conversation with Calvin, we the species. We're all one.
Yeah.
We're all one. And if the epidemic has taught us one everlasting thing, we are one. And there isn't a place on this good earth, with reference to Pearl Buck, this good earth, there isn't one place that is not affected by the pandemic and COVID. So we are one species. Finally, if you had but one message to tell students, what would it be?
What would I tell my babies? Go out there. I want them to question everything. That's easy for me. I tell my students that from the first day they walk into the door and the last thing they walk into the door. Don't you take anything as face value. Don't you listen to a sound bite or read a meme or go through some second or third, source. Get it from the horse's mouth, right? Learn it and then go elsewhere, challenge it, question it, keep digging, because that's the only way that we can fully understand and get true opinions, as opposed to regurgitate what we've heard someone else say and believe it because it's mere regurgitation. We see how we can just.
That's just great.
Yeah. That's important. That is the most important thing to me, is questioning everything.
Wow. This has been a wow of an evening spent with you. And there's so much that is up here that you filled me with, the insights, and what a special educator you are, above and beyond. And I'm so thrilled that we had a chance to meet, and we had a chance to interact, and our commonalities, notwithstanding Newark, special place.
Yeah.
Special place. Always will be a special place.
Yeah.
You know, hometown
A
stuff.
part of-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wish you only good things,
Thank you, Calvin.
and we will continue,
you.
and you will come back, and we'll do more. And I thank you so much
Of course.
for your time and your graciousness,
Of course.
and of course also Rutgers that bonds us in the teaching. You know, by proxy, I've been a teacher for 43 years.
Yeah.
The consummate elementary school teacher out there in the wings. So thank you so much, and to be continued.
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
I love that.
Perfect.
Ellipsis, ...
Perfect. So I'm signing off. Thank you so much.